Because of the online world, we have been introduced to so many different oddities and cultures and the way of life for many different people that without the internet we might be living in blissful ignorance. And of course, some of these are weird and wonderful and some of these are not, and should be scrubbed from the world, should be scrubbed and never to be seen again. And one of the subcultures that has intrigued many people, including myself, throughout the years is the furries. I don't know what it is, but I just find them so fascinating to me. I genuinely cannot wrap my head around it. But you know what? If you're not hurting anyone, do your own thing, you little freak. Rock on, I guess. But within the furry community, you can imagine the amount of absolute degenerates and horrors that have occurred throughout the years. Because, well, trust me, there's a lot. But unfortunately, it's this select few that have given the entire fandom a bad name, as the furry fandom isn't actually that horrendous when you look into it. Well, the fandom is, but some furries really are not. So today I thought we could have a little bit of a deep dive into the horrors of furries and the worst incidents that have ever occurred, as well as the more controversial figures within the community. So before we do this, I just want to give a disclaimer that just because this video is titled The Horrors of Furries, I need to make clear that not all furries are bad at all. I'm just regurgitating incidents that have happened that furries have been involved in, but it doesn't mean they're all bad. Some of them are genuinely in the fandom because it's full of art and, you know, creativity rather than the off-putting side of things. So without further ado, let's just get straight into this topic. But first of all, we need to address the question of what is a furry, in case you don't know. So the furry fandom is a subculture invested in anthropomorphic, I cannot say that word, anthropomorphic animals. And these animals have like human-like traits such as 2 legs, they can speak, they wear clothes, and it's sort of a way to express themselves in a different way, I guess. You see these people dressed in fursuits at conventions that cost thousands, by the way. Have a look how much a furry outfit costs, which means majority of furries probably have pretty good jobs because they have thousands! Or they're really talented and they've made them themselves, which some people shouldn't do that, and we'll come on to why in a minute. For some, as mentioned previously, being a furry just means enjoying the artwork, the comic, the movies, the games with these characters in it. So, for example, Zootopia is quite a common one that gets brought up because of these characters. Sonic the Hedgehog as well is another one. It's just a way to express yourself as an animal, and that's not weird. That in itself isn't weird. I think that's creative. You see people in their fursona costumes, which they make, which is just a furry version of themselves. They'll go to cons, they'll, you know, role play, they'll take part in all those things. But again, they keep it relatively safe, you know, they keep it normal. The roots of the furry fandom actually date all the way back to like the early 1970s and 80s. Like, this isn't recent, this has been a thing for decades. And this was when sci-fi comic conventions and, you know, the nerds started to really gain traction and gain more popularity, and this is when it came about because people would dress up as like their favourite characters. Now, of course, furry conventions are still very much a thing today, but these conventions are actually like relatively safe. They're supposed to be family friendly because all it is just sharing art and like creating things together as a community, buying merchandise of other artists because they all have something in common. But it wasn't until like later in the 2000s where furries began to really explode in popularity, and I use the word popularity loosely because they kind of got their whole shtick exaggerated and spoiled. Because in 2001, the Vanity Fair actually wrote an article about furries, and instead of displaying them as a fandom that just enjoys art, they displayed them as a fandom rooted in fetishism, and it's not like that. They would cherry pick the most examples and ignore the creativity and the conventions and the sort of community that these people had created. Instead, they just said it was weird and yeah, ruined its reputation, and it's still not been the same since. And this is when it created the stigma that furries are nothing but bizarre, sex-obsessed role players, which isn't actually true. And I'll pull my hands up, I didn't know this. Before researching this video, I had my mind closed to furries, but Upon doing this, I see it. But it doesn't help that some people involved in the furry fandom and involved in the culture have certainly not exactly done their best to change this view. Instead, they have just solidified it for many people, including myself, before this video. So basically, all you need to know is just because furry, not bad. Some furry good and creative, some furry pedo or zoophile, but it's not all of them. But because some furry bad, they give good furry bad stigma. Okay, we're on the same page. So while we're on the topic of stigma and furries misbehaving that we should probably get out the spray bottle for, let's talk about some of the controversial events that happened with the furry convention. So first of all, it wouldn't be a furry video without mentioning the disaster that is the Rainforest Convention. So the Rainforest Convention had annually been held in Seattle, Washington, and it had been held since 2007. And when this convention first started, they would have members joining in like the hundreds, like 200, 300 people would show up because it was small at the time. And all it was like you'd have a couple of panels, you'd have people creating artwork, you'd have people, you know, showing off their fursuits that they'd either spent all this money on or made themselves. It was relatively innocent. I need to preface that. The Rainforest Convention started off as a really sweet and innocent way for people to just share their art. But by 2015, it had gained more followers. I think about just below 3,000 at its peak. And for years before 2015, it actually had a pretty good reputation because it was charity focused, it always ran smoothly, and it attracted international guests from all around the world. But things started to go wrong when more people got involved in this convention. Because by the early 2010s, this convention began to blow up in size thanks to the online world. And because of this, you know, boom in attendance, the staff of the convention, which were actually volunteers, they weren't really paid, and they struggled to keep up with managing security, the rules, and as well as crowd control. And these events would be held in hotels and such. And it really began to blow up in like 2014, 2015, because the 2015 Rainforest Convention is where it really went wrong. According to both staff at the hotel and Rainforest staff, they had noticed a very small group of furries that were kind of spoiling it for everyone else. It wasn't all of the furries, it was just this select few that were causing chaos. They were damaging property, they were setting off fire alarms, harassing non-attendees, and even drugs and alcohol were like being used at this convention, which was supposed to be like a family-friendly convention. There were even claims that some furries were actually getting so off their faces that they had trashed hotel rooms to the point where they genuinely couldn't be used. They had to be like deep cleaned. That it was so bad that in 2015 the hotel where they would usually host Rainforest, the convention, actually turned around and were like, yeah, we never want you back here again. Essentially blacklisting the convention because word gets around in the hotel community apparently. So other hotels in the area were also being told, hey, Rainforest, don't allow them to use your venue because they are gross, they trashed the hotel room, they used all that, even to the point where one of them actually flooded a toilet and water from the toilet was flooding the venue, and this was like poo water. And again, the furry fandom already had this shaky reputation with some hotels because of this small group and within the world, the internet world itself. So you can imagine after this convention, you can imagine how people were taking it. People thought this was genuinely hilarious because it was proving their point that all furries were weird, when really it wasn't all of them. And really it wasn't all of them, it was just the select few that had to ruin it for everyone else. Rainforest staff actually made a public statement in 2015, and they did admit that mistakes were made on their end because, you know, they didn't really know what they were doing. It blew up and it got out of hand and they didn't know how to control it, and they admitted that. They even hinted at a possible return in 2016, but because no other hotels would take them, Rainforest would be ultimately cancelled and the convention would never happen again. And of course, the final nail in the coffin was the insurance and liability problem, because after the 2015 reports of damage, insurers and other venues were just flat out didn't want to take them, so it became too expensive to run. Rest in peace, Rainforest. You'll be missed, I guess. But it's not just conventions that have landed furries in hot water, it's the people that are within the community that give them all a bad name. And some of the most controversial figures within the fandom are certainly interesting, to say the least, and this figure that we're going to talk about is known as Kiro the Wolf. Now, if you're familiar with the furry fandom, you probably already know lots about this, but I didn't, and I assume lots of you don't, so I'll tell you about it anyway. Kiro the Wolf is probably the most infamous furry on the, well, one of the most infamous furries on the internet to date, because this guy was actually pretty well loved within the fandom. He was a well-known YouTuber and streamer throughout the mid-2010s, and his content would be light-hearted gaming videos and also furry lifestyle blogs. And he would like show everyone his like fursuit and what he was doing. You know, he was just a YouTuber, just showing everyone what he was doing. He had a decent following. He like had tens of thousands of subscribers at the time, and he was seen as a positive, wholesome face of the fandom. But all that came crashing down in 2018 when a massive set of private Telegram chat logs, images and videos were leaked online. And I want to give a trigger warning because what I'm about to tell you is very, very disturbing. You can probably already guess what was in these leaked chat logs and these images in these videos because it's a furry video. But if you're none the wiser, the files exposed revealed a secret group within the furry fandom that was involved in zoophilia. If you don't know what zoophilia is, it's essentially the attraction and sexual activity with animals. But it didn't end there because it also featured zoo sadism, which is the abuse of animals for sexual gratification. And this leak went mega viral because it's disgusting, it's vile, it's disturbing, furry or not, whoever's involved in this is vile. And this went viral on Twitter, forums, and even mainstream news outlets. Fans of the furry fandom were disgusted when they saw whose name was featured multiple times throughout these chat log screenshots, and that was none other than Kiro the Wolf. The YouTuber that people had looked up to in the furry fandom had just been exposed for being one of the sickest people to walk the earth. Screenshots allegedly showed him discussing acts of animal abuse, sharing files, and associating with other well-known infamous figures within the fandom. And the material was absolutely horrifying, as you can imagine. I know probably quite a few of you are animal lovers, including myself. I'm a cat girl, so I can only imagine the disgusting things that were in there, and I didn't look. I didn't want to know, to be honest, so I'm keeping this relatively vague. But all you need to know, that in this group there was horrific depictions of dogs and other animals being. And because of the brutality of what had been seen, many furries actually took this evidence to law enforcement themselves, and communities across the fandom started banning and blacklisting those that were named within these leaks. But what about Kiro the Wolf? Well, when this information broke the news, he denied everything, and not only did he deny it, he claimed that the evidence was actually faked and that his account had been leaked and impersonated and that it wasn't him and he wouldn't do that. But there was forensic analysis done to these logs and these screenshots, and this analysis showed that these logs were authentic and there was absolutely no way that these were faked. So Kiro was banned from many furry communities, conventions and online spaces, with his fan base completely collapsing overnight. Now, there were confirmed reports of the leaks being sent to actual law enforcement. However, I can't tell you if there's been any arrests or charges, not since 2025, on any of these people that were involved in the logs. And it's quite tricky because this evidence would be quite difficult to use in court anyway. But Kiro the Wolf is just one of the many controversial furries within the fandom, because the next one that we're going to talk about is I don't want to say it's worse, but it's not better. No, actually, it might be a little bit worse. This person is known as Bill Clark, aka Shadow Wolfers, or aka Carpet Samples, and You're probably wondering, what is this guy known for in the furry community fandom? Well, whatever you're thinking, it's worse. Okay, so this is a photo of the guy's furry costume. Now, I know you're thinking, you know, it's not great, it's definitely handmade, but what makes this disgusting is that this fursuit is made from dissected plush toys and has been used as a rag for certain human fluids. It's not been washed. It's known for smelling. It's known for being gross. It's exactly what you think it is what I'm saying. And some reports from what I was reading online is that this suit actually has a functional opening, enabling Bill Clark to relieve himself without taking it off. He likes teddy bears. Some claims online, lots of these claims have come from Reddit and other forums, so again, take it with a pinch of salt. Some descriptions claim that he harasses people at conventions and forces others to smell his fursuit, or he will tell people explicit stories about the fursuit, and it's been described as, and I quote, reeking of death. But it gets worse because Bill has reportedly confessed in online forums of fantasies that include animals, goats, ponies, and other animals, and claims that these encounters were consensual. And it gets worse because he's also been accused of soliciting minors for sex in exchange for things like alcohol and drugs. But I need to preface that these reports could be bullshit. This is all allegedly because it's all unverified, so I want to preface that this is all alleged. But many in the furry fandom view Bill Clark as one of the most repulsive figures in the furry fandom ever. Fans and community members widely state that he's been banned from multiple conventions due to harassment and because of his fursuit itself, but there have been no credible sources such as law enforcement, legal records, or anything like that to substantiate these claims. So again, take it with a pinch of salt. But that photo, man. The final topic of the furry fandom that I have for this video today is the fetishes. Now, the reason why I decided to make this a segment in this video is because, again, a lot of furries get bad rap because of this side of the furries. Because originally, furries was nothing to do with fetishes. It was all art-based, but because people can, you know, involve themselves in any way, shape or form, it gets that's just how it is. But the thing is, furry fetishes aren't just sex in costumes. Instead, it's really strange. I want to say I'm not kink shaming anyone. If this is your thing, each to their own, who am I to judge? But I'm just expressing my opinion because maybe I'm not chronically online enough for this. But if you went onto Instagram right now and typed in the search bar, furry, the results you would get would be interesting because over 50% of the results are fetish content. But what fetishes are quite common in this community? Well, of course, right off the bat, we have the inflation fetish. This fetish refers to basically fattening up your character. That's the only way I can describe it, or inflating certain parts of their bodies. This is also known as expansion. That's apparently the broader term for this. And this could mean the exaggerated growth of a belly, chest, or other anatomy, usually to cartoonish and fake proportions, but some people have built their fursuits so they can partake in this fetish. But this fetish ties in quite nicely with vor. Now, vor is a fetish. What am I doing with my life? Genuinely, how has my life led to this point where I'm sat in front of a camera explaining to people what vor is? Where did I go wrong? What did I do to deserve this? Vor is the fantasy of being swallowed whole or consuming another person, usually whole and often without blood or gore, especially within the furry community. And because the swallowed character ends up alive inside the perpetrator's body or stomach, therefore inflating them, which is why these two kind of come hand in hand. Oh yeah, Vor sounds a little bit bizarre to us normal people, I guess, to us vanilla folk, but to people who are into it, it represents that of, like, comfort, like, comfort and, like, dominance and safety, I guess. And when you put it like that, okay, I don't get it, but I understand, okay? Okay. But the next one is where the line should be drawn, in my opinion, because this is just weird. To me, I don't understand this. Lots of furry art or furry depicts their characters in nappies or diapers if you're American. Now, before you weirdos point at me and say I'm the weird one for finding this weird, because you will, I'll get this in my comments, I'll get people being like, well, if you think a furry wearing a nappy is weird, then maybe you're the weird one. But you just have to think, who wears nappies? Okay, who wears a nappy? Baby, old people, vulnerable people wear nappies. So when you start introducing this into a sex roleplay, to me it's a little bit straight. I'm not saying it's illegal, I'm not saying it's but I'm saying it's strange. So ABDL, which stands for Adult Baby / Diaper Lover, is a kink or sometimes even a lifestyle where adults roleplay as babies and young children, wearing diapers, using dummies, bottles, colouring books, engaging in behaviour which associates with infancy. Now, I want to say that if people who age regress in a non-sexual way, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. I understand that. I understand why people do it. But people that age regress and make it sexual, that's what I don't get. That, I don't know about that one, Chief. But again, if this is occurring between consensual adults, who am I to judge? I'm just dollface, you know, who cares? Now, there's something that I missed out from the Rainforest Convention because I wanted to feature it in this part of the video, and that's because one of the reasons that ABDL is so notorious within the furry fandom is because of the Rainforest 2015 disaster, and that's because, according to some reports, soiled diapers were being left in inappropriate places around the hotel. Attendees openly parading around in nothing but nappies and fursuits. Keep in mind, this is supposed to be a family-friendly convention. And general complaints from other hotel guests who didn't sign up to see this were genuinely confused because why the is there a giant dog walking around with a pooey nappy on? I would also be confused. Some people use persona roleplay to be like, you know, innocent and I guess to reconnect with trauma. I understand a lot of people do it for trauma reasons, and that's, I understand, you know, I'm not gonna rip into someone for that, but you can imagine why people see this and look at it and take it the wrong way, especially the Rainforest Convention, because that is disgusting. So, in conclusion, furries are certainly an interesting group of fellas. I don't understand it, and I'll probably never see the appeal, but you know what? If they're absolutely not hurting anyone and this is taking part between consenting adults, then I don't care. Rock on, freaky bro. And it's a shame that the select minority have ruined the image of the furries, probably for a lifetime, as some furries are genuinely funny. There's this guy on Instagram and he makes furry content with his dad, like the son is the furry and he's trying to like make the dad understand it, and it's genuinely the funniest thing I've ever seen. I love them. I think he's called like Peepster or something. I'll show you a clip and I'll show you the app, but he's hilarious.
All right, Dad, we're here. Mommy!
Hey guys, easy. You're playing me to go around, all right?
Hey, are you PB's dad?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Furry inflation meeting? Does that mean balloons?
Gee willikers! Hey, are you getting a fursuit?
Hell no. You see my wallet?
Oh, I bought a new suit.
Well, you shut up!
And it just goes to show how things can be changed and made into something that it's not, and it then be ruined and have its reputation soiled. Probably a bad choice of words there, and having its reputation ruined for many, many years to come. But all in all, I don't know, maybe you should think twice before you see someone in a furry costume because they might be alright. But alas, that is all the time I have for this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know. If you have any video requests, please message me them over on Instagram, as I will be more likely to see them over there. And if I don't answer or do your response, that just means there probably wasn't a lot of information on it. And I do apologise, it's not personal. But if you would consider following me on any other social medias, the links are down below in the description. I have also recently started posting on my makeup TikTok account again because I've seen so many comments of people asking me how I do my makeup. So I'm posting over there again, and my regular TikTok, which I've kind of abandoned, but I might come back to that. And of course my Instagram, where you see the ins and outs of my daily life. So if you drop that a follow, that would be amazing. If you would consider subscribing, again, that would be amazing, as we are so close to 50k. But if you don't want to subscribe, that is also fine, because regardless, I hope to see you in the next video anyway. Stay safe.